Welcome, everyone. We'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes to get started as a courtesy to those who are still in the middle of connecting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. We have a great topic to cover today, but first, a few reminders. Please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the IM window. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your questions anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. We often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time, but I want to provide an additional mechanism to ensure any questions we might miss get answered. If you'll visit aka.ms/Azure ATP community, you'll be able to ask a question on our Azure ATP forum. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place for you to ask a question. We always love to hear your feedback about this webinar, whether we're focusing on the right things, whether it's valuable to you, what we can do to improve. You can give us that feedback at aka.ms/AATP webinar feedback. By the way, all these links that I'm referencing are posted in the IM window there, so check them out there. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/AATP recordings. While you're there, please join our community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, requesting features, giving feedback, reviewing our product roadmaps, attending in-person events, or joining webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them, so we hope you'll join us. We have a fascinating topic for you today. We'll be talking about Azure Advanced Threat Protection, specifically Identity Security Posture Assessment. I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Or Semach. He's a program manager on the Azure ATP product team, so he has deep expertise in this topic. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to him. Or?
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Hey, everyone. Thank you, Ryan, for pronouncing my last name correctly. I know that wasn't an easy task. My name is Ort Semach. I'm a product manager in the Azure ATP team based in Israel, one of Microsoft development center mostly focused on security. And I want to talk to you today about an additional feature that we are delivering into the existing Azure ATP solution, which we call identity security posture assessments. So I really want this session to focus on the main issue that we're trying to solve with the product, along with how what additional value you get out of using Azure ATP. Our agenda for today, I do want to talk a bit about an overview about Azure ATP. I'm assuming maybe most of you or some of you or most of you already have heard or are using Azure ATP with its security value, but I do want to make sure that we're covering the basics before we move forward. And then I want to introduce the new capability that we are now in public preview called Identity Security Posture Assessments, which evaluate a lot of existing configuration and data that Azure ATP gathered and provide them in a way that you can make proactive actions regarding your security posture. I want to show you how that feature looks like with a bunch of data that we gathered, and we can also present it in a way that kind of help you understand how you can take action on those assessment and misconfiguration that we expose. I want to talk a bit about the roadmap for this feature, how we want to take it further, how it integrate with additional Microsoft security capabilities such as Microsoft Secure Score, and the next step that you can take to enjoy this assessment even today. So as Ryan mentioned, please free to post your question in the text. We'll do our best to both and try to answer them in line, and also we have a Q&A session in the end, which I'm hoping also to answer most of them. So a bit about Azure ATP. Azure ATP is one of the Microsoft solutions that involves around protecting identities. We do that by having a vantage point of a sensor deployed on domain controllers, which listens to a variety of data sources, including network traffic, trace events, Windows events. And using that data, we are able to correlate in real time alerts and suspicious activities that are happening in your environment and give you all the contextual data that you need to act on them and respond quickly to potential cyber attacks in order to minimize the data. We are also providing a lot of information regarding your users as entities. If a user is subject to a lot of suspicious activity, if a user has a concept that we call investigation priority, which means that we are focusing you on what need to be done right now in order to both stop existing attacks and resolve potential security issues that might arise from misconfiguration or otherwise settings either done by a mistake or that were in place deliberately by a threat actor. We are able to provide you a lot of data regarding all the attack chain stages that we are able to create to detect from using that data. We are focusing on the what is known as the attack kill chain, meaning that we are having a lot of heuristics that are meant to discover reconnaissance attempts such as account enumeration, such as an actor trying to discover which group or user belongs to in order to target them, which we're then moving to detecting compromised credentials in terms for some actor trying to brute force a person of interest in an environment, or using any kind of suspicious activities such as suspicious VPN connections, someone connecting from an environment that he wasn't connected before, and then we trigger an alert that kind of tell you what is the action why we flag that suspicious activity, and what is the action that we recommend that you take. We also discover, for example, people taking credentials from a certain device and passing them along, what is known as lateral movement, which is a method that actors use in order to gain elevated privileges and move closer to their attack goal, which might be a specific account or a device or even a file that contains sensitive material. And we'll also be able to detect method that the attackers use in order to gain what we call domain dominance, meaning that even if the attack is over and we don't detect any lateral movement, the attacker might have reserved the right to re-enter the environment by granting himself a privileged account or creating what we call a golden ticket that we can use to re-enter the environment afterward, or even impersonate other person that we find interesting. So overall, Azure ATP was geared toward detecting and alerting on suspicious activity in real time using minimal interruption to your day-to-day work and providing you with valuable contextual data regarding alerts in your environment. The way that Azure ATP is architectured is it's pretty easy to use and deploy. We use a cloud service, the Azure ATP service, and then which has its own Azure ATP portal, which we recently announced an integration with the Cloud of Security portal. So we provide all of our security experience and investigation experience for security operation personnel over there. We have what is called an Azure ATP sensor. An Azure ATP sensor is a piece of software that being deployed onto domain controllers. Once deployed, it starts communicating with the Azure ATP service, sending it data, aggregating and sending data, using way to minimize that kind of load on domain controllers. So we have seen very large and complex environment deploy hundreds of Azure ATP sensors in a very, very minimal IT effort and maintaining them. Once deployed, the Azure ATP service maintain that sensor by upgrading its version once we create more sophisticated algorithm to detect alerts. And we always, as a cloud service, we provide continual improvement to the way that we detect, is either new detection that are found in the wild, and our research team able to create a detection algorithm based on that, and we then instruct the sensor to communicate new kind of data over to the cloud service. And most importantly, Azure ATP is part of the overall Microsoft security solutions, which involves additional vantage points such as Defender ATP that looks over at processes on the endpoints, such as Office ATP that looks for anomalies in emails, and Cloud Security, which looks up information regarding users or potential misuse of cloud apps. And of course, Microsoft is always generating new capabilities that fits in this overall Microsoft security portfolio, which Azure ATP is a major contributor, and we have made many customer feedback regarding alerts and attacks that we were able to help thwart or prevent. So Azure ATP value to the current security operation teams within companies is we get very good feedback, but I do want to talk about a new capability that we are introducing, which is called Identity Security Posture Assessments. So this is a very busy slide, but it kind of gives the message of providing a method, even very real-time method of detecting malicious activity is super important. But time after time, it was being proven that able to respond to security attacks is not only enough in order for every security team knows that, is that you also need to make sure that you have a very strong security posture. And by having a strong security posture, what you're basically doing is minimizing the attack vector that an attacker can leverage to gain an initial foothold in an environment, which will then start the whole reconnaissance compromise, lateral movement, and domain dominance phases. I've gathered around a lot of different methods of security configuration, even very, very straightforward ones that we seem over time and time, we've seen that customers and are simply maybe do not have the time to set in place, or it involves a lot of legacy component that might be very, very hard to get rid of. And I really want to focus on a few of them in here. So first of all, as you can see, LDAP is one of those authentication methods that, if misused, can result in passwords being sent over the wire in clear text, which means that some of your users, by using not for malicious purposes, but if I were to install a network capturing software or device in your network, some of the authentication method, meaning credentials, usernames, and password in clear text, would be intercepted by that. Mostly because we have found out that a lot of applications in environment simply are misconfigured to use LDAP and not in the secure form, but in what we call LDAP simple bind authentication. Which you can see here. It's sometimes it's an easy of setting a checkbox as saying, okay, use a more advanced form of authentication, and sometimes it's really okay. We're companies we're just not aware that this kind of issue happens to them. Another one is those legacy protocols such as NTLM in version 1, which are known to be abused. And there's a whole bunch of authentication protocols and communication protocols that are known for many years that should be disabled because they're not being developed anymore. A good example of that is the not recent, but the WannaCry outbreak of ransomware was created because it leveraged a protocol called SMB in version 1, which were told by a long time that should be disabled, but that kind of expert was able to leverage known vulnerabilities in that protocol and propagate to the extent that it were. By the way, correcting those authentication protocol or preventing them, it's not a major task. For example, in here, you can see a simple group policy is enough, for example, to refuse any NTLM version 1 responses. But the problem is this is what we learn from our customers, is that this involves in a very, very complex project to understand where is this authentication coming from, and do we have a legacy component, for example, that requires that. Another interesting capability is Active Directory's own capability to delegate Kerberos tickets. It's called Kerberos delegation setting, and it's presented in you can access it in Active Directory users and computers. And from that, you can see that some of the devices are configured to what is known to be an unconstrained Kerberos delegation. It's a simple setting in Active Directory, which is known to be very much abused because it gives almost absolute power to that specific entity. So a lot of time when we look at companies' infrastructure, we see that a lot of accounts are configured for Kerberos unconstrained delegation, and we ask them why. And a lot of time the answer is, oh, the application that the owner of that application has informed us that this is required by that application. And once we are able to leverage that and explain them what is the danger of using this kind of delegation, we're kind of going through to the next phase of saying, the IT teams or security teams saying, maybe we don't need that specific delegation. Maybe we can configure that to a more secure type of delegation called Kerberos constrained delegation, which instructs, basically delegation is being able to grant a specific entity the right to impersonate another entity. So by providing, for example, or the right to impersonate every user in Microsoft, if an attacker get a hold of my user or my computer, for example, he can use that to request other Kerberos tickets from other more sensitive entities and delegate them to my user. So this is also another kind of technical debt that a lot of environment currently have, and they really don't know how to start. They know that they want to get rid of, but they don't know how to start. So we're here to help with that. Another kind of weakness that we see is a lot of encryption ciphers, such as RC4, which is known to be brute forceable. It's still active in the environment, either set maliciously by actors or simply forgotten as one of the devices is using that weaker cipher, so their encrypted communication can be intercepted and decrypted by using brute force techniques. Again, it is known how to disable this kind of weak cipher in the environment, but over and over we find, much like legacy protocol, that it's simply an overlooked security configuration. So overall, you can see that there's a lot of attacks, known attacks in the wild, that are leveraging this kind of technical debt in order to penetrate an organization and move laterally in it. Even they don't need even to use sophisticated tools, they're just using known vulnerabilities, which Azure ATP was designed to detect, but a good detection have to start with a good prevention. And as you can see, we have a lot. This is a topic that goes on a lot in just regular searches, and there's a lot of tools and a lot of scripts out there that kind of, as an ad hoc assignment, try to get rid of this. But what we're in Azure ATP trying to do is to take all of this learning that we, from years of working with Active Directory, for example, and try to incorporate it into a feature which we call identity security posture. So in Azure ATP, in our new experience in Cloud App Security, you will be exposed to an ever-growing and ever-expanding list of assessment that we would automatically calculate using the already existing sensors of Azure ATP, meaning that you don't have to do anything if you're already using Azure ATP in order to start using that specific feature. And we will expose all the contextual information that is required to A, understand if there is an issue, and B, what are the entities involved in that particular assessment that we can use to get a better grade for our security assessment overall. And with that, I would like to show you how this feature looks like. Okay, so let me go backwards. In Azure ATP, currently Azure ATP is, as you can see, we're gearing toward general availability, but our new UI is part of the Cloud App Security experience. So Azure ATP is installed in the background, and it is able, once configured with Cloud App Security, we have a simple setting for that. Once you enable the Azure ATP data integration, meaning that the Azure ATP service now start sending data over to the Cloud App Security portal, a new feature will be included in the left nav bar called Identity Security Posture. When you click on it, you will be presented with all the assessments that are currently available. And right now, this feature is in public preview, so you can see in here. Actually, I'm using a more, as you can, right now we're exposing the first six report. I'm using even one to show you one of the report that we are beginning to roll out as a cloud service. We are really able to iterate really fast on our features and include sometimes matter of weeks or month additional features without need to deploy anything. So in here, you also try to get a visualization of what is the current security posture of your environment. So in here, we have the security assessment. We have the entities that are detected by that assessment. We have an urgency, which changes based on the calculation that we are making. And we are also showing you if this is a currently open item. Meaning, for example, that if you resolved one of those entities, so one of those assessments, and we discovered that a new entity is still causing issues, we will re-trigger this report and create it as an open item. So I want to drill a bit into these reports. We have the stop clear. Every security assessment has what we call an improvement action, meaning that even if you're not sure what entities exposing credential and clear text mean, both in this screen and in the subsequent report itself, we are telling you what needed to be done in order to get rid of those, in this example, credentials being exposed in clear text. So in here, we have an improvement action. We have already a calculation of the table that you see in here, focusing you on the most critical entities that you need to remediate in order to start your journey to get rid of entities exposing credential and clear text. So in here, for example, if we look at the overall trend line of the LDAP, in this example, LDAP simple bind authentication. By the way, we are ever expanding this number of authentication capabilities. So in time, when you revisit the report, we will include additional protocols and additional authentication methods. And in here, you can see a bunch of entities. Each entity has its own entity page, for example, which you can look, okay, what is client one? So when I click on it, the console will take me to the entity page, which will show me contextual information regarding that specific account or device. But if I go backward, I see that client one and a device called client one and an account called Vienna Mosley have very high number of activities, and we have another trailing 3 other entities which have even a limited number of entities, but again, still at risk. But as you can see, we are already focusing on the relevant entities because this account can include a lot more entities that are exposing their credentials. And from here, we're able to gain additional insight regarding, okay, client one is a device. I want to see, for example, all the related activities using the activity monitor, using the built-in activity monitor that is related to that specific account. So in here, we get a filter down view of all the LDAP in clear text activities that client one is performing. As you can see, it's mostly with the account that we discovered. And in here, you can gain additional information. Okay, what is this activity? Why is client one using the Vienna Mosley account to create LDAP in clear text, LDAP in simple bind activities? And when we show this to security teams, they kind of, okay, we are familiar, we're not familiar with that device, but we are very familiar with Vienna Mosley. Vienna Mosley, for example, it's a known service account for one of our financial applications. Are you saying that in client one, they're communicating only with Vienna Mosley? We're able to quickly show them all the accounts that are currently. So in here, for example, you see the client one is communicating in clear text over 2 different accounts, but this specific one is more prevalent. So what we go from here is to a very quick and informal hunting experience where we try to understand what is the application currently causing this. And once we are able to determine the application causing this, we are able to contact the application owner, informing them that we are seeing this application using this service account communicating in clear text, and asking them to remediate this kind of security posture issue. And once it remediates and we see both the trend go down and the number of accounts going down to a sufficient amount, we will able to require, for example, in this case, LDAP signage in group policy, which will refuse any subsequent LDAP simple bind authentication. So what we're trying to do with this report is really exposing the contextual information needed for the security team to start their project to get rid of, in this case, LDAP in simple bind authentication. We have the legacy protocol usage assessment reports and the weak Cipher usage assessment report kind of follow the same logic, where as Azure ATP continue profiling activities, logon, resource access, failed logons that are using, in this case, NTLM in version 1, we are also able to show you exactly what our devices, again, we see that we have the same account or same application using the same kind of entities, but in here it's from a different perspective. In here, we're able to, if I click on the activities, again, will be able to show in this example all the credential validation action happening from that specific device as a source, but in here you see using a different user. So it's basically what it means that there's a separate process on that device that is causing NTLM to be used as NTLM version 1. This account, as you can see, we are also able to share a lot of contextual information on who is the source for this communication, what is the target, who is the actor, what is the count. And again, we're focusing on finding the root cause of what is causing this kind of legacy protocol usage, as opposed to simply advising the customer to disable this account, which pretty much, as we learned, is not a perfect advice for them, because it lacks the contextual information on what they need to do first in order to minimize the chance of a certain application stops working. So in here, we can see that up until September 15, we have a lot of activities, and then we started implementing some changes that got that activity graph reduced. And once we get to a point that we are happy with we have very minimal usage of, in this case, NTLM in version 1, we're able to take the necessary step to disable it completely in the networks with assurance that nothing major is going to break in the environment. So as I said before, the weak Cipher usage report kind of follow the same path, but in here we profile weak ciphers such as RC4 and DES to be the culprit of this security posture issue. And again, as you can see, the report it's much more similar, but it's reference a very different calculation that we're doing. In here, we're also explaining. Each report has its own doc section where we talk about what is the security posture, what are the remediation steps needed to get rid of it completely. And we're trying to take you on a journey to disable the and show whoever needs to be shown this kind of overall improvement in security posture. Another report that I mentioned before, which is try to answer a very interesting question, is the Unsecured Kerberos Delegation assessment. This assessment, we profile every entity in Active Directory. As you notice, this one doesn't have a graph because we want to tell you that all of the entities in this table needs to be remediated. And right now you can see that we are showing entities that are configured for Kerberos in unconstrained Kerberos delegation. But for example, we will very shortly add additional type of or flavors of Kerberos delegation that we would like to expose here. And we would like to create a list of to-do items that security teams can take and evaluate why this specific security setting is set. Is it mandatory? And a known story in the security community that Kerberos unconstrained delegation should never be used on devices or accounts that are not domain controllers. So right now it's a very precise way of pointing a flashlight on stuff that need to be remediated in order to get a completed score for this specific security assessment. And if we fix all of these entities and we remove Kerberos unconstrained delegation, and if someone added a new one, Azure ATP will almost in real time re-trigger that security alert and will show you what Kerberos delegation, what entities you need to create. Another assessment that we haven't discussed in the previous issues were that specific services that are available on domain controllers, such as the Prince Spooler service, are also known to be abused in the wild by an actor with, for example, a conjunction with Kerberos unconstrained delegation can result in the compromise of a sensitive account and basically can provide an easy path for actors to gain additional privileges. In other words, this is the stuff that attackers, once getting an initial foothold in the environment, will immediately start scanning for and hunting of. So what we're trying to do is show you all the domain controllers that we have profiled to have the Prince Spooler. In this specific example, it's the Prince Spooler service, but we are always evaluating services on domain controller that present a security issue, and I give you all the data that you need to do in order to resolve this. So, for example, a go-to action based on this report is generating a list of domain controllers and setting a group policy to turn that service off specifically for them. Once we do that, for example, if I open in my machine, once we disable that service, that entity will be removed from that list. So we are always able to maintain a healthy security posture in terms of services on domain controller. As I said before, this is what we're starting with the Prince Spooler service, which is known to be abused by several. You can read all about it in a very easy internet search. But we are always evaluating other services that are known to be attacked, either on domain controllers or on what we call high-value assets, which are known to be abused by malicious actors, such as Exchange servers, ADFS servers, etc. In the dormant entities and sensitive group report or assessment, what we do is Azure ATP already is able to assess if a certain user is sensitive or not. We are using a method of ways, an ever expanding way of profiling that, either by direct membership to a group, such as enterprise admins or backup admins. And also you can manually designate account as services. And we have a lot of new concept, for example, called blast radius, which takes a normal user account, but if that user account is by association or by some sort of membership, is able, if compromised, to cause issues with the domain, we profile it as sensitive. And what we're trying to do here is showing you misconfigurations regarding those accounts. So for example, an existing method that Azure ATP is currently employing is called lateral movement path. Is for every sensitive users, we're showing you if we were an attacker, what kind of users, even non-sensitive users, we will able to compromise in order to gain that sensitive users credential. So that is a very, very interesting security posture capability already built into Azure ATP. If you're not familiar with it, please go check it out after this webcast. But what we also want to do is here, for example, if vendor admin, which is a privileged user, by the name, by the way, we can see the story here that we had a vendor employed in the company. He was assigned permissions, for example, to be used as a backup admin to run our backup service. That user we see here is inactive for 400 days. So, for example, this doesn't necessarily represent a clear and immediate threat to our environment, but it is something that we have learned that attackers very specifically look for this overlooked account which have already assigned to them sensitive permissions. So, for example, if an attacker gains a foothold in Active Directory and is able to guess that user's password or find or brute force it, and we see that user is inactive for an abnormal number of days here, which our threshold currently is 6 months. So if a user is both sensitive and is not being logged on into anywhere in 6 months. We will show it in this table. This is one of the many configurations that attacker loves to exploit. And we're also giving you the last thing attribute here. So you can see on August 20 in 2018, this user was last seen. So overall, what we think security team that are being exposed to this kind of information is that aha moment that said, hey, why is this user, they're asking themselves here, why is this user still sensitive? It's either it can be disabled, expired, and most often than not, it's a very overlooked attribute in Active Directory that we are able to say, hey, this is something that you need to either remove its user permission, so making that or desensitizing the account, or simply disabling or deleting it, because it's something that we would not see as we would hate to see this attack vector being exploited by a very not skilled attacker that gain a foothold in our environment. So overall, these are the 6 reports that we are now exposing to every Azure ATP customers who have enabled that integration. As you can see, there's a 7th report here, when we are also targeting a couple of new ones for the next quarter that will, for example, show the Microsoft Labs, the local administrator password management solution by Microsoft, the percentage of its deployment. We're able to show you which domain controllers are not monitored by Azure ATP, and we are always adding capabilities to these reports in order for Azure ATP to be one of your first go-to solutions, so you can start to evaluate your security posture and create your necessary to-do items. Coming back to our presentation, as I said in the demo, this capability will not appear unless you have enabled this very easy checkbox. If you are an Azure ATP customer, you can go to the Cloud of Security portal, which is portal.cloudofsecurity.com, and you can enable it right now and gain that visibility. So as an action item for this webinar, it would be if any one of you have not yet enabled this integration, we encourage you to do that. So one of the as I said, we have a very interesting roadmap for this feature, but one of the most common requests that we've got is Microsoft have a concept called Microsoft Secure Score, which aggregates improvement action from all the various security solutions that Microsoft has into a very easy to use and consumable dashboard for security admin, so they can see in a single pane of glass what is their security posture currently look like in terms of we actually give a score for each one of those activities, such as and require MFA for all users or for all admins, enable self-service password reset, this coming from Azure Active Directory. But we will also introduce all of this security assessment in this dashboard as well, so you can gain a very consolidated view of your to-do action, and we will give a score for each one of those assessments, and that score will change, meaning you will gain security points by once we discover that you are actively reducing or acting upon the information in those assessments. And for example, if you have an assessment that does not have any, for example, that previous assessment which showed 2 critical entities in the LDAP in ClearText report, if you get rid of those 2 sensitive entities, you'll get partial point for that assessment as well, so your security score will increase. So it's overall, we are learning that this is a very good experience for a security admin or identity admin that they can use to prioritize what they need to do next in order to improve their both their score, which is always nice to get a better score, and also their security posture. And it's not a one time project. Is a continuously monitoring solution that Azure ATP now is a great contributor into that. So what are our next steps? You can obviously you can learn more about Azure ATP and its security assessment. The documentation about it is already available in the official doc site. We have our best practices documentation on how to both leverage security assessment and overall in Azure ATP to its maximum capacity. You can start a trial of Azure ATP. It's really quick. It's really simple. It can take you less than a day to get Azure ATP installed in trial in your environment and see what we find out, what we are able to profile regarding your Active Directory. Please, as the product group, I can tell you that we are very much wanting to get your comments. So join the conversation in our technical community. We are very, very active in there. The product managers, the security researchers, the engineers. We're looking for your feedback regarding how we presenting our calculation correct? Do we present in a way that is meaningful to you? And also, we'd like to hear your war stories of how Azure ATP has helped you, catch the next security risk in your environment. And also you can view the past webinars. We had a webinar about how to investigate security alerts with Azure ATP, how to deploy Azure ATP. All of it is available on the below link. And with that, I'll leave the stage open for your questions. Ryan, do you want to chime in here?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. We've got several questions here lined up. One is, are there any plans to integrate Defender ATP with this detect endpoint vulnerability? And let's see, this phrase is a little weird here. Are there any plans to integrate Defender ATP and will this detect endpoint vulnerabilities as well?
So it's a great question. The short answer is yes. We want to integrate as much security insight as we can into this assessment. And we do want, for example, to not only Defender ATP, which holds a lot of the process information regarding the underlying activities, Cloud of Security, for example, hold a lot of very, very relevant data, such as legacy authentication, such as POP and SMTP, and we also want to include the hybrid accounts in those reports as well. So short answer is yes, and there's a lot of ways that we can improve that. So I hope that answers that question.
Great, thank you. Here's another one. Does Microsoft propose Azure ATP and Microsoft Defender ATP as comprehensive enough solutions to address the competitive marketplace, including products like Cisco AMP from SourceFire, CrowdStrike, and the like?
That is an interesting question. The short answer is yes, and I think Gartner agrees with us as well, because it keeps moving up and up in their leaders quadrant for our security portfolio. So the main idea is that both of the Azure ATP and Defender ATP and every security product, the main goal here is that all of these components will work in tandem, meaning that it's not a antivirus per antivirus or a UEBA per UEBA solution. It's the entirety of the best of suite that Microsoft can provide its customers. So again, we are positioning this all of these combined security solution basically as one thing that we call Microsoft Threat Protection.
Great, thank you. We've got another one here. I like Secure Score, but there's still a lot of manual elements. Is there an intention to automate more of this and provide PowerShell capabilities to query and remediate?
Yes, we are planning to create a GitHub repository with all the with all the necessary PowerShell I don't say it's not solution, but example of how to address this. For example, a PowerShell script to go to all of these domain controllers with Principal and turn it off automatically. Of course, you can do it as well with group policy. But what we're also evaluating is using tools like Azure Security Center as, for example, as an overarching solution to see if it has a component on the domain controller. And also components like Microsoft Flow, so we can automate this as close as possible to a one-click fix button, which is not always the case because we are talking about on-premise domain controller, but we are working with the different Microsoft groups in order to make that remediation as easy as possible.
Excellent, thank you. Can you speak a little bit to licensing? What licensing is necessary to use Azure ATP?
Okay, so Azure ATP is a license called, as what is Microsoft referred to as an E5 license. So Azure ATP can be purchased either as a standalone license called Azure ATP license, but it is also bundled in one of Microsoft E5 licensing suites, which is either EMS E5 or the new M365 Security and Identity E5. I might have the name wrong, but it is bundled through there. So a lot of the time we find that customers have the right to use Azure ATP and are using, for example, Cloud of Security, which is another what we call an E5 licensing, but they're basically not using all the security product that they are licensed to use. So license-wise, I would check if you have the right to use the license aspect for use of Azure ATP, I would highly encourage start deploying it.
Okay, great. You mentioned Cloud App Security, and you showed earlier how you can enable, see this functionality in Cloud App Security. For people who are new to MCAS, can you give just some brief background on it and what integration between the two looks like?
Okay, so as being discussed in previous webinars, and I would highly recommend that you go to the link and view them if you haven't. Azure ATP and MCAS has a strategic way going forward to display and enhance investigation experience what Azure ATP customer currently have in Cloud App Security. So a customer would not have to use a couple of dashboard, but they can have all the experience of both Active Directory and Cloud Apps in a single easy-to-use experience, which we also enrich with capabilities that are not available in the current Azure ATP portal. For current Cloud App Security users, I would advise you're already familiar with the experience, so the activity log already show you the activities from Cloud Apps. Now it will show you activity from Active Directory as well, and Azure ATP only capabilities such as Identity Security Posture. And the user page will be enhanced by Azure ATP data as well. We have a single alert queue, and overall, I think they will be pleasantly surprised by the fact that they don't have to learn a new portal in order to start using and enjoying Azure ATP.
And it's Astrid here, I'll just jump in there. If you're an Azure ATP only customer, you do not need an MCAS license to use the new feature. You can go to the portal.cloudappsecurity.com, you can enable the integration. You don't actually need that MCAS license if all you want is the on-premises data from Azure ATP.
Great, thank you for adding that, Astrid. So another question here related to Sentinel. Someone's asking, is having a centralized console and being able to view everything in Azure Sentinel kind of the ultimate goal?
I think the ultimate goal is choosing the right console to view the right kind of data for the customer. So there is no easy answer for that. There is no yes and no answer right now. We do know that you need Azure ATP in order to be able to calculate those assessments. We are working on, once calculated, how to better expose the data in order to have as we always trying to achieve a single pane of glass for everything that is related to security. So Azure Sentinel is also one of the areas where we evaluate how to expose the data as well. But as long as we're doing the calculation, we're able to expose security posture issues and give you the contextual data, we will basically want you to consume the data in every way that you find possible. Even if you, for example, would like your own Power BI dashboard to create yourself that pulls data out of the cloud. But again, this is a journey that we're on to consolidate as much as possible. And so right now, Azure Sentinel, for example, does not display this identity security posture, but that doesn't mean that it might not be possible in the future to view the data as well.
Great, thanks. Another question here, when will protective capabilities be added to Azure ATP? Right now, everything is detective only. Any automated investigations or remediations planned like those for Defender ATP?
Tali, are you connected? You want to chime in? Okay, so we are Azure ATP, as I said before. You can hear us.
We have, and I think this is an excellent question about proactive capabilities for Azure ATP. And in fact, already today, and following the integration that we have done with the Microsoft Cloud of Security, there are going to be several fantastic proactive capabilities. Few of these, if we think about two examples, one of them is integration with Microsoft Flow, that's giving us the ability to trigger a Flow playbook based on an Azure ATP alert. This is coming relatively shortly, and based on MS Flow, you can write a playbook that will be running automatically. Another good example for integration that is going to be announced relatively soon is a conditional access policy with Azure AD Identity Protection named Confirm Compromise, where with the hit of a button, whether it's automatic happening or manually happening, we can switch the user risk level in Azure AD to high, and by that automatically trigger a conditional access policy. As of the question about additional playbooks, we are going to announce as a part of the integration into M365 security solution, the ability to run playbooks together with Defender ATP, together with Office ATP, and automate them soon. Stay tuned for that, and we'll provide more information on that in the upcoming 2 months.
Excellent, thank you. With that, I'm just going to give people some additional links here because we're about out of time. For those who want to access the recordings, you can get those at aka.ms/AATP recordings. If we did not get to your question somehow, or if you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, you can ask a question at aka.ms/Azure ATP community. While you're there, please join our general community. So that link I just gave you is specific to Azure ATP. If you're interested in other security products as well, they're all listed at aka.ms/security community. And as always, we love to have your feedback on these webinars, whether or not they're valuable, what the best topics are to cover, how we can improve. And you can give us that feedback at aka.ms/AATP webinar feedback. I want to thank Or for a fascinating presentation. Thank the other members of the product team who helped answer questions for us. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us and being part of our community. We hope to see you next time.